April 1817. Bloomsbury, London. The rain had started as a whisper against the window panes of Hartley House that morning, but by afternoon it had grown into a relentless drumming that matched the pounding in Estelle's temples. Lady Constance's voice, shrill, unrelenting, had driven her from yet another suffocating tea, where her stepmother had spent 2 hours detailing the upcoming nuptials of Estelle's younger sisters, while pointedly avoiding any mention of her eldest stepdaughter's prospects. At 24, Estelle Margaret Hartley had long since accepted her place in the family hierarchy. Disappointment personified, the daughter who had failed her father by remaining unmarried, the cautionary tale whispered about in drawing rooms across Mayfair. The bell above the door of Blackwood and Sons chimed softly as she entered, and the familiar scent of leather bindings and aged paper wrapped around her like an embrace. Here, at least, she could breathe. Here, no one looked at her with pity or disdain. The lady has opinions, it seems. Estelle froze, her hand still on a copy of Rousseau's Social Contract. The voice belonged to a man standing near the proprietor's desk. Tall, perhaps 30, with dark hair slightly disheveled from the rain. His clothes were well made but practical, the attire of a successful merchant rather than a gentleman of leisure. He was watching her with an expression of genuine curiosity rather than the veiled condescension she had grown accustomed to. "I beg your pardon?" she managed, though her voice carried more steel than apology. "Mr. Blackwood and I were discussing Rousseau's concept of the general will." He gestured to the book in her hands. "You made a sound. Disagreement, I think. I'm curious about your perspective." No one had asked her perspective in years. Estelle found herself setting down her reticule. "Rousseau claims the general will cannot err," she said carefully, "but I find his reasoning circular. He defines the general will as that which seeks the common good, then argues anything that seeks the common good must be the general will. It's a tautology dressed in philosophy." The stranger's eyes lit with something Estelle couldn't quite name. Delight, perhaps, or recognition. "Precisely what I've been trying to articulate to poor Blackwood for the past quarter hour. Tell me, have you read Wollstonecraft's response to him?" They talked for an hour, then 2. Mr. James Barlow, as he introduced himself, was a merchant recently returned from the continent, with opinions on everything from political economy to Gothic literature. He spoke to her as if her thoughts mattered, as if she were a person rather than a problem to be solved. When Estelle finally noticed the rain had stopped and the light was fading, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years: reluctance to return home. "Will you be here again?" The question escaped before propriety could stop it. James Barlow smiled, a slow, genuine smile that transformed his serious face. "I seem to have developed a sudden interest in expanding my library. Tuesdays and Thursdays, if that's agreeable." It became their routine. Over the following weeks, Estelle found excuses to escape Hartley House on those specific afternoons. James was always there, always ready with a new book to debate, always treating her as an intellectual equal. He never asked about her family, never pried into her circumstances. In his presence, she wasn't the disappointing eldest daughter or the pitiable spinster. She was simply Estelle. It was in early June, nearly 2 months after their first meeting, that James's demeanor shifted. They were alone in the back corner of the shop, discussing a rather scandalous French novel, when he fell suddenly quiet. "Miss Hartley," he began, his voice careful, measured. "I find myself in need of... that is, I have a proposition that may seem unusual." Estelle's stomach tightened. She had been foolish to think this was different, that he saw her as anything other than what everyone else did. "I require a wife," James continued, his gaze steady on hers. "For reasons of business and social standing, I need the respectability that marriage provides, but I have no desire for the machinations and artifice that typically accompany courtship in your In society, I'm offering a contract, a marriage of convenience, with no expectations beyond public appearances. The words should have stung. They didn't. Instead, Estelle felt a strange, desperate hope blooming in her chest. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "Because you're the only woman I've met who doesn't look at me as if calculating my worth in pounds sterling. Because I enjoy your company. Because I believe we could build something honest, even if it isn't love." He paused, then added with careful honesty, "And because I suspect you might need an escape as much as I need a wife." He wasn't wrong. The thought of remaining at Hartley House, watching her sisters marry while Lady Constance's subtle cruelties grew sharper with each passing season, was unbearable. "A contract," Estelle repeated. "No expectations of affection?" "None. You would have your own household to manage, your freedom, your books. I would have the respectability I need. We would be partners, Miss Hartley. Equals. Equals." The word hung in the air between them, impossibly tempting. "Then I accept, Mr. Barlow." His smile returned, but there was something else in his eyes now. Relief, yes, but also something warmer that he quickly shuddered. "I'll make the arrangements. Shall we say 1 month's time?" Estelle nodded, her mind already racing ahead to the conversation she would need to have with her family. That, she knew, would not be pleasant. She had been correct in that assessment. The July evening was oppressively hot when Estelle sat at the dining table at Hartley House, her father at the head, Lady Constance to his right, and her 2 younger sisters, Caroline and Beatrice, flanking her like beautiful perfumed sentinels. The announcement had been made. The silence that followed was somehow worse than screaming. "A merchant." Lady Constance's voice dripped with distaste, as if the word itself was contaminated. "My stepdaughter, daughter of a baronet, has accepted a proposal from a merchant." "He's a respectable man," Estelle said quietly, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. "He's well established, educated. Established in trade." Lady Constance turned to Sir Geoffrey. "This is what comes of allowing her too much freedom, too much reading. She has no concept of what is proper." "Estelle." Her father's voice was tired, resigned. "You're 24. This may be your only offer. But think of your sisters. Caroline is to marry Lord Pemberton's son. This association with trade could harm her prospects." "Could harm us all," Beatrice added, her pretty face twisted with worry. "People will talk, Estelle. They'll say the Hartleys have fallen so far that even the eldest daughter must marry beneath her station." Caroline, gentler than her sister, reached across the table. "Surely you could wait. Someone suitable might still—" "No one suitable is coming." The words came out harder than Estelle intended. "And Mr. Barlow is a good man. More than I had hoped for." "A good man." Lady Constance laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. "Oh, how the mighty have fallen, from the daughter of a baronet to the wife of a shopkeeper. I suppose we should be grateful he's willing to take on such a burden." The words struck like physical blows, but Estelle had learned long ago not to flinch. She kept her spine straight, her gaze level. "The wedding will be in 3 weeks," she said calmly. "I understand if you choose not to attend." "Oh, we won't," Lady Constance assured her. "We won't be party to this humiliation. When you realize your mistake, don't expect to come crying back to us." Sir Geoffrey said nothing, merely nodded his dismissal. As Estelle rose from the table, she caught a glimpse of Caroline's sympathetic expression, but even her kindest sister didn't speak up in her defense. That night, alone in her room, Estelle stood at the window overlooking the garden. The house felt like a prison, beautiful and suffocating. In 3 weeks she would be free of it. Free of the pitying glances and the constant reminder that she was a failure. She wouldn't have love. She wouldn't have the fairy tale her sisters would enjoy. but she would have respect. She would have her books, her freedom, and a partner who saw her as a person rather than a disappointment. It would have to be enough. The chapel was small, tucked away in a quiet corner of Bloomsbury where fashionable society rarely ventured. Morning light filtered through simple stained glass, casting colored patterns across the stone floor. Estelle stood in the vestibule wearing a modest blue silk gown, not white, for this was not that kind of, wedding, and clutched a small bouquet of wildflowers that Mrs. Dorothy Pembroke, her elderly neighbor and only guest, had pressed into her hands. "You look lovely, dear," Mrs. Pembroke whispered, her wrinkled face kind. "And nervous. That's normal. Normal." Nothing about this was normal. Estelle's family had kept their word. Not one of them had come. The absence felt like another rejection, though she told herself it didn't matter. This was a business arrangement. She didn't need their blessing. James appeared in the doorway of the chapel proper, and Estelle's breath caught. He wore dark formal attire that emphasized his tall frame, his expression serious but not unkind. When their eyes met, something flickered across his face. Concern, perhaps. He crossed to her quickly. "You're alone," he said quietly. "As we discussed. My family—" She couldn't finish the sentence. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Then, to her surprise, he reached for her hand, his touch warm and steady. "Then we are enough. You and I." The ceremony was brief, the words spoken by a kind-faced vicar who seemed more interested in completing the rites than questioning the circumstances. When James slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple gold band that somehow fit perfectly, Estelle felt a strange tightness in her chest. "I, James Edward, take thee, Estelle Margaret, to be my wedded wife." His voice was clear, steady, and he looked directly at her as he spoke. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death us do part." Love and cherish. They were just words, part of the ceremony. Yet something in his eyes made them feel heavier than they should. When it was her turn, Estelle's voice nearly broke. "I, Estelle Margaret, take thee, James Edward, to be my wedded husband." The words felt more real than anything she had ever spoken. "You may kiss the bride." James hesitated for just a moment before leaning down. His lips brushed hers with surprising gentleness, barely a kiss at all, more a whisper of possibility. When he pulled back, his hand was still holding hers. "Mrs. Barlow," he said softly, and there was something almost reverent in how he spoke her new name. The carriage ride to her new home was short. The streets of Bloomsbury less grand than Mayfair, but charming in their way. When they stopped before an elegant townhouse of warm brick and gleaming windows, Estelle blinked in surprise. "This is yours?" she asked. James helped her down from the carriage, his expression almost sheepish. "I did say I was established. Commerce can be quite profitable when done properly." The interior was even more surprising. Not ostentatious, but refined. Tasteful furnishings. Artwork that suggested genuine appreciation rather than mere display, and everywhere, books. The entrance hall alone contained 2 overstuffed bookcases. "I'll show you the house," James said, and there was an eagerness in his voice that reminded her of their afternoons at Blackwood and Sons. "The drawing room is here, the dining room, but I thought you might want to see the library first." He led her up the stairs to a room that stole the breath from her lungs. 3 walls of floor-to-ceiling shelves, filled with volumes that ranged from ancient philosophy to contemporary novels. A large desk sat near the window, and 2 comfortable chairs flanked the fireplace. "I thought—" James cleared his throat. "That is, I hoped you might consider this your space. To read, to write if you wish. Whatever you like." Estelle moved to the nearest shelf, running her fingers along the spines. Homer. Virgil. Dante. Wollstonecraft. Austen. I've never had a space that was truly mine. Now you do. He remained in the doorway, as if afraid to intrude. The bedroom adjacent is yours as well. I'm on the floor above. We'll maintain separate quarters, as agreed. As agreed. The reminder of their contract should have been reassuring. Instead, it felt oddly disappointing. James, she turned to face him. Thank you. This is more than generous. You're my wife, Estelle. I want you to be happy here. The way he said her name, familiar, intimate, made her heart skip in a way that was decidedly inconvenient for a marriage of convenience. The first weeks established a rhythm that was both strange and surprisingly comfortable. They took breakfast together, discussing the morning papers. James left for his business affairs, whatever they entailed. He remained vague on specifics, while Estelle managed the household with a freedom she had never known at Hartley House. In the evenings, they dined together, then often retreated to the library. It was during those evening hours that Estelle found herself falling into dangerous territory. James was attentive in ways she hadn't expected. He noticed when she reread passages of her favorite novels, and the next day those same books would appear with markers at particularly beautiful quotes. When she mentioned in passing that she loved white roses, they began appearing in the library every few days. He remembered everything. Her opinions on literature, her preference for tea over coffee, the way she bit her lip when concentrating on a difficult passage. You're staring, James said one evening, glancing up from his book with a slight smile. Estelle felt heat rise to her cheeks. They were seated in their respective chairs by the library fire, a domestic scene that felt dangerously like something real. I was thinking about how I expected this arrangement to feel more contractual. His smile faded slightly. And it doesn't? No, she admitted. It feels rather like friendship. Something flickered in his eyes. Disappointment, perhaps, though it was quickly masked. Friendship is valuable. It is. She hesitated, then added with careful honesty. You've been kinder to me in these few weeks than my family. Has been in years. James set down his book, his full attention on her now. Your family are fools if they cannot see your worth. The intensity in his voice startled her. You barely know me. I know that you have one of the finest minds I've ever encountered. I know that you face cruelty with dignity. I know that you deserve far better than what you've been given. He stood abruptly, as if his own words had unsettled him. Forgive me. That was too familiar. James. Estelle rose as well, closing the distance between them without quite meaning to. You're not too familiar. You're exactly what I needed. They stood close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes, close enough that when he raised his hand, his fingers almost brushed her cheek. Almost. At the last moment, he let his hand drop. I should retire, he said roughly. Good night, Estelle. She watched him leave, her heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with friendship, and everything to do with the realization that she was falling in love with her husband of convenience. Mrs. Pembroke noticed, of course. The elderly widow had taken to visiting twice weekly, bringing gossip and sharp observations in equal measure. He looks at you like you're the sun rising, she commented one afternoon over tea. Estelle kept her gaze on her cup. We have an arrangement. Nothing more. Arrangements don't buy out entire flower shops. Arrangements don't memorize favorite books. And arrangements certainly don't look at a woman like a drowning man looks at shore. You're imagining things. And you're lying to yourself, dear girl. Mrs. Pembroke's voice gentled. There's no shame in wanting more, especially when it's clear he wants it too. But Mrs. Pembroke didn't understand. James had been clear from the beginning. No expectations, no demands. If Estelle revealed her growing feelings, She risked destroying the one genuine relationship she had ever known. Better to keep her heart guarded and her marriage intact. The crisis came in the form of a letter, delivered by an agitated servant while Estelle was arranging flowers in the drawing room. "From your father, ma'am," the man said, his expression troubled. The letter was brief and brutal. Sir Geoffrey demanded an immediate meeting to discuss dissolving this unfortunate union before further damage is done to the family name. Lady Constance, it seemed, had been busy spreading rumors throughout society. Whispers that Mr. Barlow was a fortune hunter, that Estelle had been manipulated, that the marriage was invalid due to undue influence. Estelle was still staring at the paper when James entered. One look at her face and he was at her side. "What's happened?" Wordlessly, she handed him the letter. She watched his expression harden as he read, his jaw clenching. "They cannot dissolve our marriage," he said flatly. "We were legally wed. This is harassment, nothing more. They're spreading lies about you, about us. Let them." But there was something in his eyes. Worry, perhaps, or calculation. That evening, a visitor arrived unexpectedly. The man who entered the drawing room bore a striking resemblance to James, though younger and with an easier, more open demeanor. "Thomas," James stood abruptly. "What are you doing here?" "Looking for you, brother. You've been playing at commoner for long enough, don't you think?" Brother. The word hung in the air like smoke. Estelle felt the world tilt slightly. "Thomas, not now." "Not now?" "James, your steward has been searching for you for months. Your properties need attention, your responsibilities. Get out!" James's voice was dangerous, low. But Thomas had already seen Estelle's stricken expression. His eyes widened with understanding and dismay. "Oh, she doesn't know, does she? You didn't tell your own wife that you're the Marquess of—" "Thomas!" The name was a bark of command. But it was too late. Estelle stood slowly, her mind racing to rearrange everything she knew. The books, the house, the vague business affairs. The way Mrs. Pembroke had once commented that no merchant spoke with such education. "Marquess," she repeated, her voice hollow. "You're a Marquess." James turned to her, his expression anguished. "Estelle, you lied to me." "I never lied. I simply didn't. You let me believe you were someone else entirely." Her voice rose despite her best efforts. "Why? Why would you do this?" "Because I needed to know you wanted me for myself." The words burst from him. "Do you have any idea what it's like? Always wondering if people see you or merely your title. I needed one thing in my life that was real. So you made our entire marriage a deception?" "No." He moved toward her, but she stepped back. "Everything between us has been real, Estelle. Every conversation, every moment. Built on a lie." She felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. I thought I finally had something honest. Someone who saw me as I am. But I was just another game to you, wasn't I? The poor, desperate spinster who would never question the merchant who married her." "That's not true." James's composure was cracking. "I married you because sitting in that bookshop with you was the first time in years I felt like myself. Because your mind is extraordinary and your courage humbles me. Because—" He stopped himself, breathing hard. "Because what?" "Because I love you," he said simply, devastatingly. "I've loved you since you argued with me about Rousseau. And I was terrified that if you knew who I really was, you would see me differently. That I would lose the only genuine thing in my life." Estelle felt as if the ground had opened beneath her. Love. He loved her. But it changed nothing. The deception remained. "I can't." She turned away. "I need time to think." "Estelle, please. I'm going back to my father's house. To think." "Don't." His voice broke on the word. "Don't let them have you back?" Stay. We'll work through this. But Estelle was already walking toward the door. She needed air, needed space, needed to understand what was real and what had been carefully constructed illusion. Behind her, she heard Thomas murmur something to James, but she didn't stop to listen. Lady Constance's triumphant smile when Estelle arrived at Hartley House told her that coming back had been a mistake. But she had nowhere else to go. The room at Hartley House felt smaller than Estelle remembered, the walls closing in with each breath. 3 days had passed since she left James, since she learned his true identity, and her stepmother had spent every moment reinforcing that the marriage must be dissolved. "I've already consulted with our solicitor," Lady Constance said, standing in the doorway as if to prevent escape. "The deception regarding his identity provides grounds. We can have you free of this unfortunate entanglement within weeks." Free. The word should have brought relief. Instead, it felt like a sentence. "I need more time," Estelle said quietly. "Time?" Lady Constance's laugh was sharp. "Time for what? To let yourself be humiliated further?" "He lied to you, Estelle. Manipulated you. This is exactly what comes from your stubborn independence." Estelle turned to the window, watching rain streak down the glass. James's words haunted her. "I love you. I've loved you since you argued with me about Rousseau. Was it possible to love someone and still deceive them so completely?" A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Caroline entered hesitantly, her pretty face worried. "Estelle? There's someone here to see you. Mrs. Pembroke? She's quite insistent." The elderly widow swept past Caroline with surprising energy, her sharp eyes taking in Estelle's pale face and wrinkled dress. "Out!" she commanded Caroline. "I need a moment with my friend." When they were alone, Mrs. Pembroke moved closer, her voice dropping to something almost tender. "You look dreadful, dear." "Thank you," Estelle said dryly. "He looks worse. I saw him yesterday, you know. Your husband, the Marquess of Ashford." She said the title with deliberate emphasis. "He's refusing to eat, spending every hour in that library you both loved, waiting for word from you. He lied to me." "He protected himself," Mrs. Pembroke corrected. "There's a difference. Did you know his first wife died in a carriage accident? That he was pursued by every fortune-hunting mother in London for 2 years afterward? That women threw themselves at him without caring who he was, only what he had?" Estelle felt something shift in her chest. "He never told me about a first wife. Because he wanted you to know him, not his tragedy. Just as he wanted you to see James, not the Marquess." Mrs. Pembroke sat down heavily. "I'm old, Estelle. I've seen many marriages. What you have with that man, that's real. The title doesn't change the hours you spent talking about books. It doesn't change how he looks at you. It doesn't change that he chose you when he could have had anyone. But he didn't trust me enough to tell the truth. And have you trusted him with yours? Have you told him that you love him?" The question hung in the air. Estelle's silence was answer enough. "Foolish children, both of you," Mrs. Pembroke said, not unkindly. "Hiding your hearts because you're afraid? Well, I didn't come here just to lecture. I came to deliver an invitation." She pulled a heavy card from her reticule. "A ball at the Ashford residence on Grosvenor Square tomorrow evening. Your entire family has been invited." "My family?" "Indeed. Your stepmother has already accepted, though she doesn't know who the host is. The invitation came from the Marquess of Ashford. No mention of Mr. Barlow." Mrs. Pembroke's eyes glinted. "I suspect your husband has a plan. The question is whether you'll be there to see it through." After Mrs. Pembroke left, Estelle stared at the invitation for a long time. The Ashford residence on Grosvenor Square, one of the most prestigious addresses in London. James's true home. A world she had never imagined belonging to. "I love you," he had said. And if she were honest with herself, Truly, devastatingly honest, she loved him too. Not the merchant or the Marquess, but the man who had debated philosophy with her in a dusty bookshop. The man who had filled a library with her favorite books. The man who had looked at her like she mattered. Maybe Mrs. Pembroke was right. Maybe they were both fools, hiding from what they truly wanted. The ballroom at Ashford House was a vision of crystalline elegance, chandeliers dripping with light, mirrors multiplying the splendor, and everywhere, the cream of London society. Lady Constance stood near the entrance, resplendent in purple silk, her expression smug as she surveyed the assembled guests. "A Marquess," she whispered to Sir Geoffrey. "We've been invited to the Ashford ball. This could be exactly what we need to restore our standing after Estelle's disaster." Sir Geoffrey merely grunted, his attention on the receiving line where their host would soon appear. Caroline and Beatrice clustered nearby, their excitement palpable. "They say the Marquess is extraordinarily wealthy," Beatrice whispered, "and still unmarried after years of mourning his late wife." "Not unmarried," Caroline murmured, frowning. "I heard he recently wed, quite suddenly." But before they could speculate further, the crowd fell silent. At the top of the grand staircase, a figure appeared. James Edward Sinclair, Marquess of Ashford, in full formal attire. Dark coat cut to perfection, decorations of rank gleaming on his chest, every inch the aristocrat he had been born to be. He descended the stairs with natural authority, and the crowd parted for him like water. Lady Constance's face went white, then red. Sir Geoffrey made a choking sound. That's... Beatrice couldn't finish. "Mr. Barlow," Caroline whispered. "That's Estelle's husband." James reached the bottom of the stairs and surveyed the ballroom with cool precision. His gaze swept past the Hartley family without acknowledgement, searching the crowd for something, someone else. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the space. "Thank you for joining me this evening. I apologize for my recent absence from society. I've been occupied with a matter of great personal importance, securing the hand of the most extraordinary woman I have ever known." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Lady Constance tried to push forward, but James's steward subtly blocked her path. "However," James continued, his expression sobering, "I have made a grave error. In my fear of being valued for my title rather than myself, I concealed my identity from the woman who became my wife. I hurt her, and for that, I stand before you all with no defense save this. I love her. I have loved her from the moment she challenged my interpretation of Rousseau in a bookshop in Bloomsbury. I loved her when she had no idea who I was. And I love her still, even knowing I may have lost her." The ballroom was utterly silent. Even Lady Constance seemed frozen. "So I ask," James said quietly, vulnerability clear in every word, "if she is here tonight, if Estelle Margaret Sinclair, Marchioness of Ashford, is here, will she grant me the opportunity to apologize properly? To begin again, this time with complete honesty?" For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, from the back of the ballroom, a figure in simple ivory silk began moving through the crowd. Estelle had arrived late, slipping in through a side entrance. She had heard every word of James's speech, had seen the raw emotion on his face, and she had made her choice. The crowd parted for her, whispers following in her wake. Lady Constance made a strangled sound of protest, but Estelle didn't even glance in her direction. Her eyes were locked on James, who stood at the center of the ballroom looking at her as if she were the only person in the world. "You're the Marquess of Ashford," she said when she reached him, her voice carrying in the silence. "I am." "And you deceived me about your identity." "I did." No excuses, no deflection. "You should have trusted me with the truth from the beginning." "I should have," he agreed. I was a coward. I am a coward. Terrified that if you knew about the title, the wealth, the expectations, you would see me differently. That I would lose the only real connection I've had in years. Estelle took a breath, aware of hundreds of eyes on them. I was also a coward. I never told you that those afternoons in the bookshop were the happiest hours of my life. That our evening conversations meant more to me than anything I'd ever known. That I fell in love with you and was terrified to admit it because our marriage was supposed to be a contract. She paused. The title doesn't change who you are, James. You're still the man who memorized my favorite books. Still the man who gave me a library of my own. Still the man I love. Merchant or Marquess. James's expression transformed, hope blazing across his features. You love me? I love you, she confirmed, though I'm still quite angry with you. I will spend the rest of my life making amends, he said, closing the distance between them. I swear it. The rest of your life? She raised an eyebrow. That's a rather long commitment for a marriage of convenience. To hell with convenience. His hands came up to cup her face with infinite gentleness. I want a real marriage, Estelle. With you, if you'll have me. Kiss her already, someone shouted from the crowd. Mrs. Pembroke, Estelle realized with a laugh. James smiled, that slow, genuine smile she had fallen in love with. May I? Instead of answering, Estelle rose on her toes and kissed him herself. The ballroom erupted in applause, but she barely heard it. All she knew was James's arms around her, his lips on hers, and the absolute certainty that this was real. When they finally pulled apart, James kept her close, turning to address the room while still holding her. Allow me to properly introduce my wife, Estelle Margaret Sinclair, Marchioness of Ashford. The finest mind, the bravest heart, and the greatest blessing of my life. More applause, genuine this time. Estelle caught sight of her family across the room. Lady Constance looked as if she might faint. Sir Geoffrey appeared confused, and her sisters seemed caught between shock and something like admiration. But it was James who spoke next, his voice taking on an edge of steel as he looked directly at Lady Constance. I should mention that my wife and I will be establishing our household according to our own preferences. We'll be receiving guests based on their character and kindness, not their relationship by blood. Those who have shown my wife disrespect in the past should not expect invitations in the future. Lady Constance's face went from white to crimson. Sir Geoffrey simply turned away, defeated. Caroline, however, broke from the group and approached hesitantly. Estelle? Her voice was small. I'm sorry, I should have defended you. I should have... Estelle felt James's hand tighten supportively on her waist. She looked at her sister, truly looked at her, and saw genuine remorse. We'll talk, Estelle said quietly. Later. When there aren't quite so many witnesses. Caroline nodded, tears in her eyes, and retreated. The ball continued around them, but James drew Estelle toward a quieter corner. Are you all right? He asked softly. I am now. She leaned into him, marveling at how natural it felt. Though I think we have a great deal to discuss, starting with the fact that you apparently own half of London. He laughed, the sound rich and genuine. Quarter of London. Don't exaggerate. And you have properties in the country? Several. And a title that apparently comes with significant responsibilities, many of which I've been neglecting shamefully. He turned serious. But none of it matters without you. The houses, the title, the wealth. It's all meaningless if I can't share it with someone who sees me rather than the trappings. I see you, Estelle assured him. I've always seen you, even when I didn't know the full truth. Then will you come home with me tonight? Not to the house in Bloomsbury, to our real home. Let me show you everything. Let me start being honest about all of it. Estelle pretended to consider. Will there be a library? The finest private collection in England. Then how can I refuse? They left the ball shortly after, slipping away while the crowd was distracted by the orchestra. The carriage ride to Grosvenor Square was short, but felt suspended in time, James's hand never leaving hers. The true Ashford house was magnificent. A palatial residence that made the Bloomsbury townhouse look quaint by comparison. But when James led her through the marble halls to the library, Estelle understood why he'd kept his secret. This wasn't just a library. It was a cathedral of knowledge. 3 stories of books connected by spiral staircases, with reading alcoves tucked into corners, and skylights that would fill the space with natural light during the day. It was overwhelming, beautiful, and utterly intimidating. "This is too much," she whispered. "No." James drew her into the room. "Look closer." She followed his gaze to a specific alcove near the window. The shelves there held familiar volumes. Her favorite novels, the philosophy texts they'd debated, even the scandalous French book they'd argued about. A writing desk sat beneath the window, and on it, a vase of white roses. "I had them moved from Bloomsbury yesterday," James said quietly. "Your space. In our home." Estelle felt tears prick her eyes. "You really do love me. Desperately. Completely. In a way I never thought I'd feel again after—" He paused, pain flickering across his face. "Tell me about her," Estelle said gently. "Your first wife." James was quiet for a long moment, then led her to a settee by the fireplace. "Catherine. We were married very young, an arrangement between families. We were friends, but never in love. Not the way—" He looked at Estelle. "Not like this. She died in a carriage accident 3 years ago. And afterward, every woman I met looked at me like I was a prize to be won. Like my grief was an inconvenience to be overcome so they could claim the title. That must have been unbearable. It was. So when I met you in that bookshop, when you had no idea who I was and simply talked to me about ideas, it was like breathing for the first time in years. I couldn't risk losing that." Estelle took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "You won't lose it. You won't lose me. Even when we disagree, and we will disagree, James, because I have no intention of becoming a docile marchioness, I'll still be here." He smiled at that, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "I wouldn't want a docile marchioness. I want you, Estelle, exactly as you are. Brilliant, stubborn, extraordinary you. Then you have me." She leaned in, kissing him softly. "All of me. No more contracts, no more pretending. Just us." "Just us," he agreed against her lips. The kiss deepened, years of loneliness and weeks of restraint dissolving between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against hers. "I should probably show you the rest of the house," he murmured. "Later," Estelle decided. "Right now, I want to stay here, in our library, and you can tell me about all those properties and responsibilities you've been neglecting. We have a great deal of planning to do." James laughed, the sound full of joy. "Planning? Of course. If I'm to be a marchioness, I intend to be a good one. But on my terms. Starting with ensuring your tenants are treated fairly, and your staff properly compensated. You haven't even seen the account books. I will tomorrow. Tonight, we talk about what kind of life we want to build together." They stayed in the library until dawn, talking and planning, and occasionally pausing to kiss like the newlyweds they had been all along, but were only now beginning to truly be. James told her about his estates, his responsibilities, his hopes for the future. Estelle shared her ideas about education for tenant children, about using their position to effect real change. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, Curled up together on the settee, James said quietly, "I never thought I'd be this happy again." "Neither did I," Estelle admitted. "I thought happiness wasn't meant for people like me." "People like you?" "Difficult women. Women who think too much and speak too freely and don't fit into society's neat little boxes." James pulled her closer. "Those are exactly the things I love most about you. You're not difficult, Estelle. You're extraordinary. And any society that couldn't see that is blind." 3 months later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, Estelle sat in her alcove in the library, reviewing correspondence regarding a new school they were funding in one of James's northern properties. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the pages spread before her. The sound of footsteps made her look up. James appeared, still in riding clothes from his morning exercise, his hair windswept and his expression warm. "Working again?" he asked, crossing to her. "Always. Someone has to ensure the Marquess of Ashford doesn't neglect his duties." "The Marquess of Ashford is very fortunate to have such a diligent wife." He leaned down to kiss her, his hand coming to rest on her shoulder. "Though I was hoping to steal you away for a ride through the park." "In broad daylight? How scandalous." "We're married. It's permitted." Estelle laughed, setting aside her papers. "Give me 20 minutes to change." As she stood, James caught her hand, his expression turning serious. "Are you happy, Estelle? Truly?" She looked around the library, their library, then at the man who had given her not just a home, but a partnership, not just comfort, but genuine love. The man who had seen her worth when no one else had. "I'm happier than I ever thought possible," she said honestly, "though I do occasionally miss arguing with you about Rousseau." "We can argue about Kant instead," he offered with a grin. "You're on. But first, that ride you promised." They left the library hand in hand, passing servants who smiled at their easy affection, walking through halls that now felt like home. Outside, London stretched before them, a city full of possibilities, challenges, and a future they would face together. The girl who had been dismissed as a disappointment, the woman who had been pitied for her unfortunate marriage, had found something no one expected: true love, genuine partnership, and a happiness that needed no one's approval but their own. And the merchant who was secretly a Marquess had found what all his wealth and titles could never buy: a wife who loved him not for what he had, but for who he was. It was, by any measure, the happiest of endings.